On 13th of May 2025, Peter Sullivan appeared before the Court of Appeal. He was 68 years old. He had spent 38 years in prison. Not for theft, not for fraud, for murder. In 1987, Sullivan was convicted of killing 21-year-old Diane Sindall in Birkenhead. The press gave him a name, the Beast of Birkenhead. For nearly 4 decades, that name followed him. Then, modern DNA testing found something different. A male profile. Unknown. Not Peter Sullivan. Not Diane's fiancé. Not anyone matched on the national database. Someone else. The conviction was quashed. The court did not solve the murder. It corrected the record. Peter Sullivan was not the Beast of Birkenhead. So the real question became unavoidable. Who was? Before the nickname, there was Diane Sindall. She was 21. She lived in Seacombe on the Borough. She worked as a florist. She also worked part-time at the Wellington Hotel in Bebington. She was engaged. She was saving for her wedding. That is the first thing the case can blur. The victim becomes a headline. The killer becomes a monster. The legal system becomes the story. But Diane was a person. On the night of the 1st of August 1986, she finished work. She got into her van. Then something ordinary happened. The van ran out of petrol. Diane began walking along Borough Road in Birkenhead. She was heading for help. She never made it home. Witnesses later reported seeing her near the Mersey Tunnel. One account placed a man near her. He appeared to be talking to her. Diane seemed uncomfortable. That man mattered. Because if the DNA was not Peter Sullivan's, then this sighting takes on a different weight. It may have been the last glimpse of Diane alive, and possibly the first glimpse of the real killer. The next morning, Diane's body was found in an alleyway off Borough Road. She had been sexually assaulted. She had suffered severe head injuries. There were bite marks on her body. The attack was brutal. Merseyside was shaken. Women were afraid to walk alone. The press reached for language built to frighten. Beast, Wolfman, Mersey Ripper. Those names captured the fear, but they also changed the shape of the case. Because once the public hears the word beast, it wants a face. Police were under enormous pressure. That pressure was understandable. Diane had been murdered. Her family needed justice. The public wanted safety. But pressure does not create evidence. It creates urgency. And urgency can narrow an investigation. Once police think they have the right man, every loose detail can start to point the same way. That is where the danger begins. When Peter Sullivan entered the case, the story started to harden around him. Not because DNA proved it would later do the opposite, but because the system believed it had found the monster. Peter Sullivan was arrested in September 1986. He was an unemployed labourer from Birkenhead. He was vulnerable. Later legal arguments focused on his limited intellectual functioning. They also focused on his suggestibility. That word is important. Suggestibility does not mean stupidity. It means someone may be more likely to yield under pressure, more likely to agree with authority, more likely to become confused in questioning. In a police interview, that matters, because an interview room is not neutral ground. It is pressure with walls. Police believed Sullivan had given inconsistent accounts. They also had bite mark evidence. and they had the central piece of the case, his confession. But that confession was not clean. Sullivan confessed. Then he withdrew it. He later maintained his innocence. There were concerns about the interviews. There were concerns about legal support. There were concerns about whether his vulnerability was properly handled. Decades later, Sullivan alleged he had been bullied into confessing. Merseyside police said the material available to them did not support that allegation. That distinction matters. This case does not need exaggeration. The proven record is serious enough. The confession helped convict him. The DNA later helped clear him. And that is the spine of this case. The words in the interview room could not survive the evidence in the lab. At trial, bite mark evidence helped support the prosecution. In the 1980s, that could look powerful. A mark on skin, a suspect's teeth, an expert comparison. It sounded scientific. It looked scientific. It gave the jury something physical. But skin is not paper. It moves. It stretches. It bruises. It changes after injury. A bite mark is not a fingerprint. It is a distorted impression on living tissue. That gap does not sound large, but in court, gaps can become decades. The case against Sullivan had several pillars: a retracted confession, questioned interviews, circumstantial evidence, bite mark, comparison, and no DNA test capable of answering the most important question: who left the biological evidence? In 1987, that question could not be answered properly. The science was not there. So the case moved without it. A jury convicted Sullivan. He was sentenced to life. Minimum term, 16 years. But he did not serve 16. He served 38. And all that time, the most important evidence was waiting. The evidence had been preserved. That quiet detail changed everything. Not a new confession, not a witness returning, not a suspect walking into a police station. A sample. Stored from the original case. Waiting for science to catch up. Sullivan had tried before to challenge his conviction. But earlier reviews did not free him. Then forensic testing advanced. The Criminal Case Review Commission looked again. This time, the old sample could speak. It produced a male DNA profile. The profile did not match Peter Sullivan. It did not match Diane's fiancé. It did not match anyone on the national database. It was labelled Unknown Male 1. That finding did more than weaken the case. It broke the central assumption. If this DNA had been available in 1987, the prosecution accepted it would have been difficult to charge Sullivan at all. That is the fracture line. Not a minor error, not a technical loophole. The biological evidence pointed to another man. At the Court of Appeal, Lord Justice Holroyd said the conviction could no longer be regarded as safe. After 38 years, Peter Sullivan's conviction was quashed. The Beast of Birkenhead was no longer him. Wrongful convictions do not only harm the innocent person, they also freeze the victim's case. That is the cruel mechanism here. Diane Sindall's family were told justice had been done. The public were told the killer had been caught. Merseyside was told the danger had passed. But if Sullivan was not the killer, then the real attacker was never brought to justice. That means Diane's case did not end in 1987. It stalled. A door was closed with the wrong man behind it. Every year made the truth harder to reach. Witnesses aged. Memories faded. Suspects moved. Some may have died. Forensic chances narrowed. The system did not just take 38 years from Peter Sullivan, it also took 38 years from Diane Sindall's investigation. That is why this case is not only about release, it is about delay. The wrong conviction did not solve Diane's murder. It buried the real question: who killed her? After the conviction was quashed, Merseyside police continued the murder investigation. They worked with the National Crime Agency. The target was the unknown male DNA profile. But there was a problem. There was no match on the national database. Investigators began eliminating men. More than 260 had been ruled out by May 2025. Police appealed for information. They asked people to think back to 1986. Who was in Birkenhead? Who acted strangely afterwards? Who left the area? Who was protected by silence? This is now the real case, not whether Peter Sullivan should be free. The court answered that. The case now belongs to Diane again. The DNA exists, the profile belongs to someone, and until that person is identified, the case has no proper ending. Only a correction. The accepted story was simple. A young woman was murdered. Police caught the monster. The monster went to prison. The city moved on. But the evidence no longer supports that story. Peter Sullivan's conviction rested on a case that modern DNA testing could not sustain. A confession later withdrawn. Bite mark evidence now treated with caution. A vulnerable suspect. And preserved biological evidence pointing to another man. For 38 years, Britain had a name for Diane Sindall's killer, the Beast of Birkenhead. But in 2025, the Court of Appeal removed that name from Peter Sullivan. That did not solve the murder. It reopened it. And that is the darkest part of this case. An innocent man lost nearly 4 decades. Diane Sindall's real killer may have kept them. The file is open. The DNA remains. The profile belongs to someone. Until that man is named, this case is not finished. It is only corrected. If you want the next case file, I'll look at another British conviction that collapsed under modern evidence. Because sometimes the darkest part of a case is not the crime itself. It is what the system decided afterwards.